Well, it certainly has been an unprecedented few weeks. CEOs, executive leaders, let's face it, the world you're operating in now has changed. We've rapidly morphed from business as usual to a two-pronged crisis, simultaneously dealing with a full-scale health crisis and the related economic impacts. Those of you in the top jobs now have an incredible responsibility for leading your organizations through this, first and foremost guiding and framing the organization's messaging to ensure the people that are connected to your business are up to date on what's happening right now and how they are affected. Vendors, partners, alliances, everyone in your ecosystem is impacted, and each deserves a clear and honest update on how things have changed and how they should interpret reality. My name is Steve Kokinius, and I'm here with FMG Leading CEO Dr. Matt Brubaker. Matt, thanks for taking the time.
Steve, this has been quite a week. I'm glad we've been able to sit down and pause and reflect a little bit on what we've learned, what our clients are learning, and how we might be able to share some of that with others.
Absolutely. And Matt, I know FMG Leading advises a lot of clients from a range of industries. I've got to imagine that with all that's happening in the world, you're in communication with those CEOs and leaders almost on a daily basis. What are you helping them wrestle with most often? I mean, are there any common concerns that are frequently coming up these days, or any topics or issues that you're hearing that seem to be consistently on everybody's mind?
Well, Steve, sure. The reality is anybody leading a business over these last couple of weeks is dealing with this primarily and most of the time. And so really, if you think about the conversations I've been having, they fall into one of a couple of buckets. There are certainly a number of businesses right now who are sitting back a little bit, paying careful attention to what's happening and thinking about what their moves are going to be. They have the luxury, because of the industry they're in, to be able to take thoughtful moves like they're playing a game of chess. And those folks are asking really important questions like, what are the long-term impacts? Where should we be? What will the impacts be on our people, most especially? And then there are others who are leading businesses that are being impacted right now, and they're making difficult decisions on a daily basis that impact the livelihoods of their teammates. These are tough calls. There's no simple right or wrong in most of these. It's really wrestling very thoughtfully with the short-term and the long-term economic impacts of things. Yeah, the reality is CEOs and business leaders are being asked to process a lot of information on a daily basis, and the world we're operating in really reinvents itself every 24 to 48 hours in a crisis like this. So even having a clear plan yesterday doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to have what I need in order to be able to operate my business effectively today. That's the nature of crisis, and frankly, there are other fields and other sectors where this is a more common operating model. But the reality is, for most of us, this is not the kind of thing we learn in business school.
No, not at all. This is uncharted waters.
So while we're reinventing our business literally on a daily basis, communication becomes so critically important. For most of us, there are leaders and teams and folks in our organization who are looking for something to do. They're eager to lean in and make an impact. And they're looking for direction from their leaders almost on a daily basis.
Right. And if you think about communication from that leader's perspective, there's really two groups that they're focusing on, right? Internal and external stakeholders. I'm wondering if we could talk a bit about the internal stakeholders, the teams and the employees that these leaders are managing through these times. What sort of advice are you giving around what people need to hear from their leaders during times like this?
Sure. So first of all, we need to be in communication more frequently, right? It's obvious that this is a time where our people need to hear more from us, but especially the right kind of communication. There are messages we all receive every day right now that inspire more panic than they do clear, focused action. And so I'd say to any leader who's thinking about reaching out to their organization to get really grounded in the mindset, in the psychology and in the needs of the people who will be hearing the message, and to recognize that there's a couple of core fundamental needs that sit in the heart of every teammate right now as they wait to hear from their leaders. The leader's job has always been about telling a story that aligns and engages and motivates the people in their organization. That hasn't changed. The reality is, in the midst of a crisis, that story needs to be more relevant, more current, more now, and more grounded in exactly what's happening. in order to make sure people stay focused and confident in the midst of
Right.
what's happening.
Right.
We
Exactly.
often use a really simple rubric that we picked up years ago from a management professor who studied leadership in nomadic people groups. The idea that if people didn't have a static place with which to identify themselves, they needed a better story in order to stay clear on who they were. And so the three questions sort of, who are we, right? Fundamentally, at our core, what are we all about? Where are we at right now? Meaning, how are we supposed to interpret the place we're in? And where are we going? Help us understand what our destination is. The first one, who are we, is all about our mission and our purpose and our values and the things that we cling to again and again to define why we exist. This is a time for leaders who are telling stories to their people to revert back to purpose and mission before we get into plans and talking about what we're doing and what we're doing differently. Everything we do as an organization is grounded in this sense of purpose. So the best communications I'm seeing in the leaders who are handling this with the most confidence and clarity tie everything back to a sense of purpose. This is why we exist. This is what we stand for. This is why
Mm.
we're here. Make sure your response in a time of crisis anchors people in things that are mutually understood and grounding, like clarity of purpose and vision. And look, we all know the values statements that sit on the back of business cards or get put on posters in waiting rooms. I'm not talking about those kinds of things. I'm talking
Right.
about really clear, widely understood understanding of why we exist.
Mm.
The second question, where is here, is an even more important one, because the reality is if you turn on CNN or Fox News or BuzzFeed or wherever you happen to get your journalism these days, you're going to find an unbelievable amount of information characterizing the nature of this crisis. We all know we're in a crisis. The leader's job in a time like this is to tell a story that interprets that crisis in light of the organization's purpose. This is where we are. This is where FMG Leading is. This is where our organization is right now, and how we should interpret what's happening in the world around us. Not to spin it, but to help people understand what our response ought to look like. How do we characterize what's happening? This is the most crucial part of it, and frankly, the most difficult one to get right.
Yeah.
And then the third and the final question is, where are we going? And it's not enough to talk about where we want to be by the end of the year. This is where we need to translate activity into very direct, clear steps that our teammates can take. Here's how we're going to operate for the next week. Here's what we're trying to do. Here's what it means to stabilize our business. Here's what it means to make sure we keep taking care of our core customers in spite of the fact that we're not showing up at the office. Here's what it means that we're going to operate remotely. Those kinds of things can be answered very directly as a leader tells a clear story. So to summarize it, the leaders who are handling this with the most finesse right now and providing the most clear and solid guidance to their organizations are constantly coming back, probably on a daily basis, but if not daily, every other day. Here's who we are. Here's why we exist. Here's how we are looking at what's happening in the world around us. And here's where we're going. Here's what I'm asking of you, each of our teammates. Here's the support that's available to you. And here's what we'll do together as we progress through this.
And I imagine that's got to be pretty uncomfortable for some senior leaders because they're used to setting the long-term vision, the long-term mission for the company. And now they're being called upon to set the daily or weekly vision as well and interpreting that into what it means for their teams.
Yeah, it is uncomfortable, Steve. And the reality is, for many of us, we're just as stressed out as the employees and the teammates we're trying to serve, right? There are many,
Mm-hmm.
many competing demands. Almost every one of us is looking very carefully at cash reserves, thinking about how long we can last, looking at our bank arrangements, our credit facilities, and all of the other things we know we're going to need to take advantage of in order to be able to
Sure.
steer our businesses forward. Our
Sure.
teammates don't necessarily need to hear about that kind of stuff, right?
No.
What our
Right.
teammates
Right.
need to hear is our leaders are leading. We're building a plan. Here's how that plan will affect me, and here's how that plan translates into our ability to provide the service or the value that we're committed to providing to our customers. Steve, the other thing that I'm watching some of the best leaders do right now is to also connect the organization's purpose to the larger human crisis happening around us. Organizations that see themselves as connected to and part of the larger communities and the larger systems where they live and work are helping our people see the bridge between work and making an impact in a broader human sense during a time like this.
Yeah, it's so critical to keep an eye on the humanity piece and the community piece amongst the leaders' needs to juggle all the different parts of their business.
Yeah, the final point I'd make about internal communications is because we're heads down in balance sheets and financial conversations and making lots of other sort of on the moment difficult choices, sometimes communication with our teammates can become very one-sided. And it's critically important. We don't have time for town halls and big spacious discussions right now, but it's really important to make sure we're also getting a sense of how our communications are landing. Feedback from specific groups of people or specific pockets where you know you're going to hear the truth and you're going to understand if you need to adjust the frequency or the tone of your message.
Thanks, Matt. And it's definitely clear that internal communications require a lot of thought and intentionality to be effective. And I'm wondering if we could pivot for a moment to talk about external communications. I don't know about you, but my email inbox is absolutely flooded every day, every hour from a new company that I've never heard of or I didn't even know I was on their mailing list. And you were talking about cable companies and airlines and outdoor clothing manufacturers giving me an update on their business. And some of them are instilling confidence and providing a bit of value. Got to be honest, the majority of them seem to be really tone deaf and disconnected from what's happening.
Yeah, I think, Steve, by the time this crisis resolves itself and we're all looking back with a degree of perspective, we'll be chuckling about some of the worst of the email communications we received with
sure.
COVID-19 in the subject line. You know, the reality is there are a lot of folks who are sending out messages right now because everybody else is sending out messages right now. And as I engage with our clients, certainly they're not in that category, but I think it's a really important phenomenon to say, don't be like those guys. Meaning, if I'm going to be in touch with my customer base right now, they're already overwhelmed. They're taking care of their kids from home. They're trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills if their income's been cut back. The last thing they need from us is another email to delete because it adds literally no value. So I guess what I'd say is if we're in the process of thinking about how to communicate with our customers who are literally the reason we exist as a business, let's stay grounded in the idea that we need to be adding value, right? And there are lots of good reasons to share communications with your customers right now. Number one, just we care about you. We still care about you. Number two, there are obvious impacts and changes where actual facts need to be exchanged. Here's how we're operating differently. Here are the kinds of things that will change as a result of our plan to engage with this new phase. The reality is we should be communicating those facts, and we should be communicating them very clearly and try not to wrap them up in something gimmicky or difficult to get our heads around. It's just, hey, folks, here's what we're doing. If you're running a restaurant in the center of town and you're converting to takeout only, and here's how we can still be able to help you enjoy a nice dinner, by all means, let me know that in an email.
Right.
And by the same token, in many of these small businesses, some of my favorite COVID-19 emails over the last couple of days have come from local businesses that I support, that I care about. And my family have come to the point of feeling connected to the folks who serve us. So I want to get a message from one of those businesses that gives me a very clear way to do something for the people we interact with every week, and how to support them or take care of them. I'm all ears. So I think recognizing what your customers want to hear from you right now and how we remain connected during this time is a really big deal. But I'll tell you, if you don't have something of value to share, don't share it. You know, I'll give you one example that I think stood out really clearly, and it's been well chronicled in the media already as a best practice. But the Disney Plus subscription service, figured out a couple of days before the weekend that they had Frozen 2 ready to drop. They owned it, and therefore it was their prerogative to be able to provide that early. That was an incredibly positive reflection on their brand. And also something done that frankly just added a lot of value to a bunch of families who were spending their weekend indoors for the first time.
Right. I mean, it's not like you don't have to buy anything else, right? You've already bought the Disney Plus subscription. We're just giving you this gift.
Exactly. Exactly. So look, most of us aren't running a business like Disney Plus right now. Most of our clients are either healthcare organizations or investors or professional services organizations. So we're going to have to turn that into a metaphor and say, what is it that we do that if we were creative and said, how do we add value to our customer base right now, even if our primary way of doing business is interrupted? What would it look like to bring value to these folks? The goal here is not to profit economically during a time like this. We all need to keep the lights on, but the profiteering emails land really poorly. Instead,
Mm,
I'd be racking my brain saying, what is it that these people need from me? How do I maintain this connection? And above all, how do we remain connected as human beings? Because this is going to be a long ride.
totally agree. Thanks, Matt, for taking the time to share your thoughts. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We remain in the business of providing counsel to companies as they scale and navigate change. We're fully engaged with that calling today more than ever, and we'll continue to collect, aggregate, and share with you the best insights and best practices we can get our hands on. If you have a best practice that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you at info@fmgleading.com. Until next time, stay safe, operate smart, and continue to lead with empathy and humanity.